Beijing and Shanghai are more than 1,300 kilometers apart. On this train, that distance shrinks to under 5 hours. 40 years ago, where these towers now stand was just a fishing village of a few tens of thousands of people. Today, more than 17 million call it home. And above these streets, food is delivered straight to people's balconies by drone in minutes, with no delivery rider ever having to weave through the traffic below. But these towers, most of them were built by people who don't come from this city at all. Every year, at this exact time, nearly 300 million of them make their way back home, the largest periodic migration on the planet. Not because they couldn't stay in the city year-round, but because, for so many of them, their children still aren't allowed to go to school in the very city where their parents work, pay taxes, and help build it up every single day. This is the paradox of a country racing toward the future faster than almost anywhere else. The people building that speed aren't always the ones who get to fully live inside it. That story is scattered across a journey, one that begins in a small village tucked into the mountains, passes through cities shaping the future of humanity itself, and then, just like hundreds of millions of people every year, comes back to where it started. Let's begin exactly where this country's greatest story of lifting people out of poverty began, a small village in Hunan. This is Shibadong, a small Miao village tucked deep into the mountains of Hunan province. In 2013, this was the very place where a policy began that would change the lives of more than 800 million people across the country, the Precision Poverty Alleviation Program. Before that, this village had been all but forgotten. No paved roads, no reliable electricity, per capita income among the lowest in the entire country. Today, this concrete road connects the village to the outside world. Cell signal reaches even the farthest mountain slopes. What was once unimaginable is now simply normal. But the road out of poverty in villages like this one rarely stops at electricity and paved roads. For so many families, the next step is a long journey, as the youngest among them leave the village to find work in big cities. It's a story that repeats itself in tens of thousands of villages across this country every single year. For so many families, the path out of poverty begins with a journey away from the very place they were born. And that journey out of the village for a new generation is now far faster than anything their parents ever experienced. This is China's busiest high-speed rail line, connecting the country's two largest cities, Beijing and Shanghai. more than 4,300 kilometers, covered in under 5 hours. The line officially opened in 2011, just a few years after China began building its first high-speed rail network. Today, that network stretches over 40,000 kilometers, longer than the rest of the world's high-speed rail combined. No paper tickets, no long lines for ticket checks. A single scan is all it takes to board for a journey that just 2 decades ago would have taken a full day or more. On this same train could be a worker heading to the city in search of a job, a businessman on a day trip, or a student returning to school after a break. This speed doesn't discriminate about who's riding it. And as the tracks draw closer to their final stop, one of the clearest proofs of this country's pace of development begins to rise on the horizon. This is Shenzhen, one of the clearest embodiments of speed in this country. In 1980, this was just a small fishing town with a population of under 30,000. That same year, the Chinese government chose this place as the country's first special economic zone, an experiment in opening up to foreign investment and market economics. 40 years later, Shenzhen is home to more than 17 million people, one of the largest tech hubs in the world. This is where globally influential tech giants are headquartered, spanning social media, telecommunications, and drones. The city is often called China's Silicon Valley. For the city's oldest residents, this transformation happened within their own lifetime, not something read about in a book or seen in a documentary, but witnessed firsthand. Few places on Earth have let a single generation watch an entire transformation from rice paddies to megacity unfold within one lifetime. But the lights of this megacity don't shine evenly on everyone living beneath them. This is Baishizhou, one of Shenzhen's largest urban villages, just a few kilometers from the city's skyscrapers. This is where hundreds of thousands of migrant workers live. People who came from other provinces to work in this city's factories, construction sites, and even its glossy office towers. In China, every citizen is registered at their place of birth under a system called hukou. That registration determines access to many essential public services: schools, health insurance, certain social benefits. Which means, even if someone has lived and worked in Shenzhen for decades, directly helping build this very city, their hukou, on paper, still belongs to another province, sometimes thousands of kilometers away. And for their children, this often means it's harder to get into public schools in the same city where their parents work, or their families have to pay extra fees that local hukou holders don't. So for many families, it comes down to a choice: bring their children to the city and face those barriers, or leave them back home in the care of grandparents. The people who built this city's skyscrapers aren't always the ones who get to fully live inside them. But just a few hundred kilometers away, another city is showing just how much technology can reshape everyday life in a very different way. Hangzhou has been famous for thousands of years for West Lake, one of the most celebrated landscapes in classical Chinese poetry. But this ancient city is also the birthplace of one of the world's most influential tech ecosystems, home to Alibaba's headquarters and the Alipay payment platform. Here, mobile payment has become such a default part of life that many young people say they can't even remember the last time they carried a wallet. Even the oldest vendors at this market handle the technology with an ease that surprises many Western visitors. Because while most of the world moved from cash to credit cards, then eventually to mobile payment, many parts of China skipped the credit card stage almost entirely, jumping straight from cash to phones. This is one of the clearest snapshots of how fast technology gets adopted into daily life here, fast enough that old habits have all but disappeared within a single generation. But there's one exam held every year that shows not every race in this country is as effortless as a quick QR code scan. This is Maotanchang, a small town in Anhui province, known by an unofficial name, China's biggest exam prep factory. Every year, tens of thousands of students from across the country move here, singularly focused on preparing for one exam, the Gaokao, China's national college entrance exam. More than 13 million students sit for it each year. For so many families, this isn't just an exam. It's close to the only chance to completely change the trajectory of a life. Many parents relocate to live near the school for the entire final year of high school, doing nothing but cooking, doing laundry, and making sure their child can pour every available hour into studying. During peak exam prep, many students study 15, 16 hours a day, month after month. On exam day, the whole town seems to hold its breath. Cars are banned from honking near the test sites. Construction work pauses. Parents stand waiting outside the school gates for hours, unwilling to leave even for a moment. This pressure doesn't come from an unreasonable demand. It comes from a reality. For millions of families, the score on this one exam decides which doors open and which stay closed for the rest of a life. This is one of the least talked about costs of growing up in a society where the chance to change your life is real, but the path to it is incredibly narrow. For those who make it through this exam and step into office life, another kind of test is waiting. This is Zhongguancun, the area often called China's Silicon Valley, home to thousands of tech companies, from giants to brand new startups. For years, one term became familiar to the tech workers here: 96, working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. At many companies, this was treated as an almost unspoken norm, especially during the industry's hottest growth years. But in recent years, an opposite trend has started to emerge, especially among young people: Tangping, lying flat. This isn't laziness. It's a deliberate choice, opting out of the relentless race for promotion, choosing a simpler, less pressured life, instead of trading away an entire youth for work. The phrase spread quickly on social media, becoming a way for many young people to voice their exhaustion with brutal competition in work, in housing, and even in the expectations around starting a family. The extraordinary pace of this country's tech growth and the human limits of the people driving it don't always move at the same rhythm. But that same fierce competition is also what's pushing this country to lead in an entirely different race: the race for clean energy. This is one of the largest solar farms in the world, spread across the Gobi Desert in Inner Mongolia, land once considered nearly useless for any kind of farming. Today, China leads the world in installed solar capacity, as well as electric vehicle production, well ahead of any other country. This barren land now powers millions of households in cities thousands of kilometers away, carried through one of the longest ultra-high voltage power grids on Earth. On the streets, electric vehicles now make up more than half of all new cars sold each year, a shift many other countries are still struggling to catch up to. With running costs a fraction of gasoline cars, many drivers say the monthly savings alone are enough to seriously consider switching to electric for good. This is the ambition of a country once branded the world's polluting factory, now working to rewrite that very story by leading in green technology. And if solar power is an ambition reaching toward the sky, there's another ambition reaching even further out into space. This is Wenchang, one of China's most modern space launch centers, sitting right on the tropical coast of Hainan Island. Just a few decades ago, China's space program lagged behind most of the world. Today, it's one of only 3 countries to have ever sent humans into space using its own technology. China's Tiangong space station is currently orbiting Earth, one of the very few space stations operating in the world right now. And the Chang'e lunar program brought back samples from the far side of the moon, something no other country has ever done. Most of the engineers behind these missions are remarkably young, many born right around the time the country began investing heavily in its space program. For this generation, the space program isn't just a scientific project. It's a symbol of the belief that their country can lead in whatever field it chooses to pursue. The ambition to reach beyond Earth is perhaps the clearest symbol of just how fast this entire country is rising. But while one generation looks up at the stars, another generation, in a very different part of this country, is growing up without their parents by their side. This is a small village in Guizhou, one of the provinces with the highest rates of workers leaving home to find jobs elsewhere. This is a familiar sight in so many villages like this one. Grandparents raising young children day to day in place of parents who are working somewhere else. In China, this phenomenon even has its own name, Liu Shou Tong, left behind children. An estimated tens of millions of children across the country are growing up this way. Parents working in distant cities, children staying behind in the countryside with their grandparents. The cause, largely, traces back to something we've already seen in another city on this journey, the hukou system. Bringing a child to the city means facing higher school fees, more complicated enrollment procedures, barriers not every family can afford to clear. So for so many families, a short video call every evening becomes the main way parents and children stay connected. Not for a few months, but often for years in a row. This isn't the story of just one family. It's part of everyday life in tens of thousands of villages across this country. This is the quietest cost of this country's extraordinary growth. The people building the cities, the people keeping the factories running, sometimes have to trade away the very years their children spend growing up. But there's one time of year when this distance, at least temporarily, closes. When the new year comes, hundreds of millions of them will board trains and buses to go home, and those nightly video calls, at least once a year, become real reunions. The same road, the same small village tucked into the mountains of Hunan. But this time, right at New Year, the people who once left are making their way back, one by one. For so many families, this is the one moment of the year when every video call, every unfinished conversation, finally becomes a real embrace. Over these 11 stops, we've traced one of the most remarkable journeys any country has ever made. One that shrank vast distances down to a few hours, lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, and reached all the way out into space. But that journey also passed through costs rarely talked about, families living apart, children growing up through a phone screen, exams that decide the shape of an entire life, and people who built the cities but don't always get to fully live inside them. This isn't a perfect country, and it isn't a story made only of achievements to admire from a distance. This is a country moving faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. And like every rapid transformation, it has people racing ahead and people still catching up. The future in this country has truly arrived. But the real question was never how fast it got here. It's who it got here for first.